Live over here, live over there. I love social equity. We live.
I love social equity.
But we waiting for one more.
There we go.
We live everywhere. We live. Not yet. Not yet.
That's what happens when you put
Forgive
me
us.
in infant mode. There we go.
It's our first time doing this, and
That's
it's
it right there.
in the spirit of being available for everybody on different stations. We wanted to go live as many places as we could. That's gonna be our new mo. Going live everywhere.
Yeah.
So we love social equity. We've been out here loving social equity for the last 3 years. I don't. So in terms of loving social equity or loving equity, we've been experiencing equity. Disproportionate treatment, war on drugs, racism, white supremacy. So of course, as black folks, as folks who actually went through the war on drugs and other things, we gonna love equity. So we've been around repping equity around cannabis, formally in Massachusetts, I guess for 3 years now in the program. My wife is in economic empowerment program. We're in the EE program and the SE program, which is equity. You understand me? The EE program was the first program they had out, and it was 120 some odd. How many in the EE program?
Yeah, I'm 123.
EE stands for economic empowerment.
This is here in Massachusetts because we have some folks who support us across the country.
So we want to get that.
EEs. That's one of Massachusetts' social equity, or one of their equity programs in the cannabis industry to promote
Social equity.
They said it's to promote full participation. However, it depends, I guess, on who you ask.
Well, full participation in the beginning, as it was recognized, as we recognized when we were trying to get legal, we recognized full participation was black owners. Simple and plain, everybody who owned in the cannabis industry legally is white, but everybody who getting arrested is black or brown.
4 times at like a disparity rate.
So when we started the equity program, we knew who equity was for. Prior to the equity program, we knew who equity was for.
Facts.
Now that
Slide it
that way. Nah, it's not working. Now that we need deep in giving benefits out for it, people seem to forget who the equity is for. But it's for black and brown people to get ownership in the cannabis industry that is dominated by 97% white folks. I think it was 98, 99% white folks. But as soon as the equity programs opened up, you had disproportionate white folks who had been disproportionate in other areas in life. Marginalized in other areas in life.
They themselves have had fallen victim to being to prohibition, being either arrested or having some type of CORI associated with marijuana. So they qualify for the social equity portion of this. But so for today's conversation, we are looking at the draft regulations here for 2020 in Massachusetts. Each year, the CCC puts out a set of regulatory language that they want to get the public's feedback on, so that they can finalize and then vote on it and promulgate into their regulatory framework for the next year. And especially since the industry is so new in Massachusetts, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that are happening. So this past week, actually it started on Juneteenth, but this past week they had the draft regulations up and available for folks, and in it they went over a couple of provisions. And we, of course, loving social equity, we looked at the provisions through that lens to see, okay, what language are you putting in to help support and promote equity, to promote the moving the needle so that we see full participation at all levels in this industry. We're talking ownership and everything else outside of that, but in terms of the data that they are producing, they're heavy on showing Who are the people obtaining licenses and who are the people opening up shop here in Massachusetts?
Can I just say something? Because how they started the Juneteenth,
Oh, okay, yeah.
how they started the Juneteenth, the CCC meeting.
Yeah.
You know, it was extremely disrespectful. Hoffman, you know, claiming to be a champion of equity, claiming to be a champion of those harmed by the war on drugs, this racist war on drugs. He was giving himself a pat on the back for what they were doing for equity, and his continued striving to educate himself on what equity is and what he should be doing on Juneteenth, on motherfucking Juneteenth. Excuse my language. But this is significant because if anybody knows the history, what happened with June 19th, it was the day of emancipation from slavery from black folks who was in slavery still in Texas for
When they
almost
finally had found out that
for almost these black
proclamation
folks was
issued.
in slavery for almost 300 years after the treaty, after slavery was after the Emancipation Proclamation. Black folks was in slavery for almost 300 more years in Texas. And so that's what this this June 19th celebration was about. When these black folks learned that they was in slavery still. And that's some messed up stuff to still be in slavery another 300 years. Cattle slavery, you know, they breed her to me, even though she might be my auntie, cousin, or whoever she might be, so we can have a baby. It's crazy. That's why I keep reminding people, cattle slavery. You know, we were bred for commodity. But anyway, the reason why I wanted the reason why that's so demonstrative, because here it is, the war on drugs. They declared that the war on drugs was over. This whole thing is about the war on drugs being over. The war on drugs from cannabis being over, which represented 40% of the arrests, or the war on drugs arrests, cannabis arrests. So here it is. Marijuana is still a Schedule I drug. They started a new task force to arrest black folks and brown folks, and they're arresting children. They're arresting our children, our teenagers. The illicit market, that's where the teenagers is at mostly, because they ain't old enough to go get it. So here it is. Ironically, you understand me? Is there going to be another 300 years before we truly are done with the war on drugs, even after they declared it to be done? So that's why we have to realize what this social equity is. Social equity is not a handout. Social equity is wartime reparations, wartime rehabilitation to a people, a country, to their roads, to their neighborhoods, their communities, their water systems. In some places, ain't got clean water. Their housing, their education. This is what this aid is supposed to be, because you said America had an entire war directed toward the black community. Sorry to take over, baby. Just give me this 1 second. I'll be done in a second. America had this entire war to take over the black community under the guise of, you understand me, these people are criminal, but it was really about our skin color. So now that the war is over, you directed resources, you directed police, guns, jails, more prisons being built every year. So now that the war is over, you say you want to give us some wartime, in time repair. So that's what this social equity is supposed to be about, and equity is supposed to be about in cannabis. Because while white folks was in 90-something% ownership in $1 billion industry, black and brown folks was a part of another $1 billion industry, the prison to school pipeline. And I know, because I was 13 years old the first time I was abducted, kept for over 12 hours. So every time I've been arrested, which has been a whole bunch of times since that time I was 13, it's an abduction to me. Because I was abducted at 13. My very first encounter with police was an abduction. I was never charged with anything. I was interrogated for over 12 hours without my parents present, beat up. Me and my friends was beat up. And then we was left back out. Then we was thrown back out on the street. And then I got arrested at 14. I was charged as an adult. for marijuana. But that's what this is about. So everybody getting cute about it. You understand me? All these folks marginalized in other areas in life. Don't you know you just beating up on some folks that's already been beaten up? You victimizing more. This is more victimization of the victims. This is more victimization of the victims. You come in here to get my social equity? You come in here to get my equity in cannabis after I've been being arrested for years for this shit, and then you gonna try to beat me up and slander me and lie about me behind the scenes? But excuse me, I'm sorry, I got off bar for a second. But we ain't come here to talk about that, I don't think. Nah, we didn't.
You're more than welcome to talk about it.
Nah, because people
the
treat it.
The reason why they even have equity, the reason why they champion why we need to legalize cannabis in Massachusetts is because they talk about the folks who have been harmed the most by the war on drugs. But yet you don't see them at the forefront having a voice and the opportunity to articulate what this actually means. What is the reality of this? Instead, you have people who co-opted the movement, people who want to take this opportunity and leverage it for their own positioning, leverage it for their own personal desire, because many folks want to participate in the plant freely and without having to deal with the issues of, tied to prohibition that you see in other places. And so there is great cause to sit there and say, oh, I'm for social equity. It's been used, it being the plant has been used to harm people significantly over the years. So yes, it's only right that we make it legal, because look at what it's done. But then when it comes down to addressing the very people that they're talking about, they want to silence those folks. And we have some people here in Massachusetts who want to go a little bit more than silence, and in fact discredit, slander, and a whole lot more. But our conversation today was really to look at what happened yesterday with the CCC's initial meeting. I mean, it was really, they put the regulations out Friday, and it's going to be out and up and available for people to provide public comment on. Contact the commissioners. They give their contact information. I think it's commission@cccmass. I don't remember. Gov. Must be. Anyways, and that's how you can communicate with them. But one of the things that we're looking at is where is the actual equity in that. I think they have social equity defined in there. They have economic empowerment measures that they talk about in there. But when we look at our goal as a state to ensure full participation, when we look at what the CCC can be doing given the parameters that they have to promote social equity, to promote equitable participation, to support those who are in their equity programs, we just don't see the heart of that anywhere. And this is very separate for conversations that deal with the legislature. And there is a big push. We'll put that out there the next 9 days, I guess, 9-10 days, to reach out to the legislature. There are quite a number of cannabis bills that are out there. There are a handful that folks across the industry want to see push forward because they benefit everyone in the industry. And on top of that, there is the Social Equity Fund. If you were paying attention to what happened with the House bill yesterday for the Massachusetts police reform, folks were just now realizing, yes, in our legislature, we say money will go from the marijuana tax to support the police departments, specifically their training in the form of public safety and so forth. So these are things that aren't talked about a lot, and I think the conversations need to happen because of the irony of it, given why we have this.
So defund the police. Defund the police. You just said we funding the police, right?
Yeah. So defund the police is a different movement. You don't hear much. You hear there are some people in the cannabis space who are talking about defund the police.
No, I know it's not in cannabis.
Oh, okay.
But just nationally, the cry is defund the police. Defund the police. Police departments are being defunded. Here it is.
But they're not.
Here it is. We just ended the war on drugs. Billions of dollars annually went to fund the war on drugs. Why don't they have the money? If we're not fighting the war on drugs no more. You understand me?
Where's that money that was originally for that war? Where is it gone?
Let me explain something to you. This ain't pretty for me. Because I'm the one that be getting locked up. I'm the one that get locked up. People who look like me get locked up. So why it's still a Schedule I drug, and they making all type of loopholes to still lock folks up. The ACLU told you in the report the arrest rate increased for black and brown folks. You understand? We're still being disproportionately arrested. Colorado, the arrest rate increased. California, they was just jumping on a little girl. She couldn't have been over more than 14 years old because he talking about she smelled like weed. You understand me? Like, yo, what is going on? And then everybody want to kind of trying to steamroll us in these social equity programs and equity programs like we don't belong here, when they still going to run out there and do the same thing. And I just told you, this is supposed to be repaired for a war. So this is just the tip of an iceberg. Because where's the black community at? Where's the black business owners at? Where's the black folks demanding that they repair us for this war that they're saying they're sorry for right now? They're saying that the war is over. The war against us is supposed to be over. They not mass incarcerating us no more. They not locking us up no more. Yeah, right. But this is the rhetoric.
Yep.
So why isn't the black community hopping on this? Not just cannabis,
Well,
everything.
Still the stigma with it. There's still the stigma.
Not just everything. Everything. What do they owe us? Let's do the tally. Because we pay out billions of dollars in building bridges and roads and stuff for these companies, for these countries we blew up. What you mean? Y'all, America, we never been bombed? You never heard about MOVE? MOVE in Philly? Look up MOVE in Philly. If you never heard about MOVE, MOVE in Philly, and you telling me they ain't dropped a bomb on us. They ain't been dropping bombs on us.
I think there's a lot of history that has been lost by both, by all people in this country, Americans, whatever, however you self-identify, black, white, red, yellow, and there's a lot that folks do not understand that the black community has endured. Even the black community themselves have not recognized that. So to bring it back to what we're saying here in the cannabis industry and why it is important to have these conversations, and to have these conversations and engage the people who have actually experienced this and gone through this, and not just the folks who are excited about having access to freely have access to a plant, is extremely important. And it's a shame on Massachusetts to see, when we look at the social equity program, when we look at the economic empowerment program, to see how it's been handled, and to see the voices, whether it's those at the leadership level or those who are just outside of that level and tied to leadership in Massachusetts, to see their voices are the ones that are looked to for information, are looked to for guidance as the authority in this space, when you have no authority in this space. Your role, whatever it be, whether you are a public official, whether you are a journalist, your role is to listen to the people. Your role is to listen to the people and to learn, to find out how we can collectively work to actually achieve the goal that you said you're going to achieve. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about social equity. Let's talk about equity in Massachusetts, and let's talk about where it is that equity can happen, but it's not happening, and what needs to take place for that to happen. So
you mean instead of going behind our back and lying about us and slandering us and doing a slander campaign, how about an open conversation?
Absolutely.
About equity and the Massachusetts Marijuana Social Equity Report and the PIES program and everything else we pushing?
Absolutely, and I think there's a misconception that any population of people are a monolith. We're not a monolith. And you can look at that. You can see that here in Massachusetts, just in the way that folks respond to how it is that equity is rolling out. Folks respond to who it is and what the folks are saying. Some folks are easily corralled by beautiful rhetoric, and other folks are like, I've been there, I've done that, or I've always been
got the
to
t-shirt,
look at the results.
Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, been wearing it for 2-3 years now. I love social equity. I love it so much. I've just been still here waiting for it. I've been still waiting here to get it.
Hopeful that it might actually happen. And so you do have people in the social equity program who will champion and say, wow, social equity has worked for them as an individual. But again, we're not a monolith. What does that mean? That means that one voice is not representative of all voices. And the voices that you say you want to hear, I'm still looking to see, where are they? where have you brought them to the table? We pointed this out in the Massachusetts Marijuana Social Equity Report, and that report, many folks have read it. It's clear that folks have read it. However, to acknowledge it and to champion it is to recognize the downfall and the shortcomings of where we are as an industry, and to put in your face to say, if you really want to do these, some of these things are very actionable. So let's really look at it. Here it is with these draft regulations. They're talking about. I'll actually give credit. They turned around and said for the social equity participants, they made it explicitly clear and put in their, and they're proposing in their regulation that the language say that you have to have 51% ownership of your business in order to qualify for the benefits that are tied to the SE program, specifically the discounts and the fee waivers. And
it was already in legislation, though, right?
Not for SEs. For SEs, you could argue that you could do it at 10%.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so for them to switch gears, because if you go back to the conversations that happened earlier this year, from April to June, the conversations focused on trying to change the EE ownership and diminish that, which would go against equity. So to see that they went the other direction and then put that that additional requirement with SE and saying that that was 51% ownership, that's the proposed regulation. That's a move in the right direction. So from there, though, we go to their conversation about economic empowerment, which, again, we have to, aside from being an EE certificate holder, looking at what the EE certificate program was set out to do and the very stringent limitations that they've put on it since the beginning, it's imperative that we don't let this program fail. It's imperative that we do not let those who are EE certificate holders and who worked really hard to get to that point and to think that they were going to be able to enter into this industry and contribute positively in a demonstrative way in our communities that have been disproportionately impacted, to see that fall to the wayside is problematic. And so that's one of the major ways we're looking for equity in Massachusetts.
That was the first charge of equity 3 years ago. The first charge of equity 3 years ago was the economic empowerment crew. And the economic empowerment, 120 some odd of us, were supposed to erect these businesses. And I'm glad all of these other folks got into all the SE programs. We don't hate anybody on any program level. We are actually SEs ourselves. So, I mean, it's just all good for equity. But who's in the programs? You understand me?
So we're going to get to that in a second.
Who's in the programs? We just went through our first orientation, and they didn't even address black folks. They talking about white and non-white.
And we made addressed.
So hold up. So this is the
social equity.
So I got to keep reminding folks what social equity is for, because somebody told me it was for everybody. But this is social equity
in the cannabis industry.
This is to combat white supremacy ultimately in the cannabis industry. So how is white folks in the equity programs that's supposed to combat white supremacy? And then they in the program so deep that they say white folks and non-white folks.
Yeah. That was pretty
like
alarming.
They haven't even classified black folks. They haven't classified black folks or brown folks.
Have asked for, which is when we're talking about the harms of the war on drugs and those who have been disproportionately harmed by this, no one questions it. We're very clear, black and brown. The arrest rates, the disparity of arrest rates, who's the disparity against? Black men in particular, with black people. So there's no problem with identifying the race. However you feel about when someone brings up the racial construct, however you feel about it is beside the point. Where we are right now as a society, where we are right now when we're talking about the harms that have been, the war that was waged on communities, we are talking about black communities, because that's what it said when you go back into the books. So we don't need to skirt around that, and we don't need to put everybody in umbrellas now, especially not umbrellas of white and non-white. That is an abomination. But
in the equity program,
just to reiterate what happened, if you're just coming in and you're like, wait, what happened? White, non-white? During our orientation for the equity program, as they were talking about data and they were presenting various information about populations, their categorization, and I'm not going to give any rationale for it, but their categorization was white and non-white. And I'd be hard pressed to find how many people actually pointed that out to the CCC, considering as that the CCC did not even feel the sensitivity in a social equity class to even address that. So let alone when you look at the makeup of the people who are in this cohort, they didn't release that this year. Hopefully they will in the upcoming meetings. We'll be asking them to release that data to describe what the makeup is. However, that in and of itself, that small nuance is a reflection, is a microcosm of what's happening on a macro level in terms of when we are asking them to have regulations that actually move the needle for equity. If you've been tracking with Mass Mother Mary, if you've been tracking with us just for any video outside of this moment right now, you've heard us talk about our PIES program. And to date, no one has brought that up. And the question you have to ask yourself is why? It's not that it's not a viable program. You have to ask yourself, when you say you want to be held accountable, and we're telling you, yes, accountability starts from the top down, and we want to hold you accountable to holding the establishments in Massachusetts accountable by putting some structure to the positive impact plan that everyone is required to implement. And we're saying not only will this provide structure, but it will also allow us as a state to reach our goals, to hit our targets in terms of promoting full participation, starting with the Economic Empowerment Program. And it's a model that is replicable. It's a model that ties into everything that we have going on. And the only thing that people who have any understanding about what's happened in other states can say is, well, incubation hasn't worked. We're not talking about incubation. Now, incubation or the incubation model and concept is a facet of the PIES program, but that's not what constitutes the PIES program. And when we sat down and put this together, we were very intentional about thinking of the areas of potential weaknesses in a program and addressing that, and thinking about the specific layout and landscape here in Massachusetts, and what do we have in place that actually would support putting something like this forward to support, to promote equity. And until we see this type of bold movement, which is not foreign to the CCC, if you looked at these regulations, they made some bold changes in there. Some of them I was surprised to even see. Makes you wonder whose ears that they're listening to, and whose voices do they have their attention attuned to, as opposed to the ones who they said that they want to hear, which are those harmed the most by the war on drugs. So if you don't have anything to chime in on that, I'll keep going through some of the...
Well, you said they were real creative. You didn't mention what they were creative about. They were real creative in how they caregivers can now have 10 patients. That was real creative.
Because you do recall when you were a caregiver and you got arrested, right?
Yeah, I do.
And so now they are regulating. This was in 2016 when hardships and care, specifically, we didn't have that many dispensaries. It's operational right here. I was just pulling up the regs. We didn't have that many dispensaries, and so the number of caregivers necessary, that it was necessary to have caregivers, and
that was real creative. You didn't need any. They didn't have to write to their legislators or. They just kind of made that move for those individuals.
To say flat out that caregivers can now have 10 patients, and not just 10 patients, but also I think like 500 square feet of canopy to grow, which is huge. And if you're not a patient or aren't in the medical space, then it may not make sense to you, but those who are, they recognize and understand that. And when we talk about equity and social equity, the medical space is another place where we do not see equity at all. There's no conversation about that. We know for a fact that the members of the CAB, the Cannabis Advisory Board, that we talked to and said that we wanted to see equity. We talked about things like having the licenses not be vertically integrated to allow accessibility for people who may want to pursue those licenses. On the contrary, the CCC has come out and made it explicit and said that those with EE status and SE status, the benefits and the priority or expedited review status only applies to 5 license categories. It doesn't even apply to all license categories. That doesn't promote equity, that limits it. So if perchance you have a science background and you're really passionate about testing and you wanted to partner with some folks and open up, or you yourself were in a position to open up a laboratory, you wouldn't be able to exercise your benefits. That's not in there. So there are all these small space opportunities for equity, and instead what we see are limitations placed on it. Again,
and I was a caregiver, and I had my medical card. I had my medical card and caregiver. Still had a secret indict. Still garnered a secret indictment.
And still was
sale to an undercover cop. So what is a secret indictment? Do you know that? So in order for, if you ever had an undercover sting, most people haven't, but if you ever had an undercover sting, or they have to go to a judge to get that cleared. So 9 times out of 10, they have to have a trial. You understand me? Unless, regardless of the fact whether they have a trial or not, they still got to come with all this information about you, and they have a trial, pretty much. A trial about you, or sometimes it's a jury trial. Sometimes you have your people, American citizens, sitting up there, you understand me, and saying whether the police should conduct a undercover investigation on you. You understand? They're presenting some evidence to these people about you, a trial that you aren't there, which is unconstitutional. You're not allowed to represent yourself or defend yourself.
It still happens here. I think anyone would be hard pressed to believe that it doesn't happen, considering the amount of unconstitutional things that are happening in this country, and they're just blatantly shared in the news and in the media.
And then they watch your ass and tap your phones and do everything else. You understand me?
They tap everything, your phones and everyone else's phones around you.
Anybody you could be connected to or whatever have you, fuck with all your shit.
Yeah. So, back to the regulations. I think one of the things, I thought you were going to comment on this, and maybe it's me bringing it up now will trigger the reminder that the CCC said in their Juneteenth meeting and in their claim to commitment to equity was that we hold them accountable. And you see, if you're on social media, you may see a lot of the things that Mass Mother Mary puts out, but know that we also send out quite a bit of communication to the Cannabis Control Commission. We send out communication to legislators. We send out commission to quite a bit of other stakeholders. And here it is, the very person, Hoffman, who said he wants to hear from those whose voices have not been
Not
heard.
just Hoffman. I've been being blocked by these government
public
officials for like several months now. You know, I'm real passionate about getting my equity. I spoke publicly at the forum, you know, and I don't mean to be a nuisance and stuff to these folks, but I'm a real individual, and oftentimes we're not treated like real individuals. We're treated just like a number on a list, you know, and that's how they treated the equity program. They just pushed the equity program aside and went to something else. But you know,
and you know what? That's interesting. You use the word that you don't mean to be a nuisance. However, this is real to everyone who is in this industry. Everyone. I mean, there are small businesses. There are individuals who are part of the traditional market, who know how hard it is to get into this industry without having the burden of and the trauma associated with what you've experienced. And so to hear these people who are in these positions, to these key stakeholders who are in these positions to make decisions, and who are the people who have the ear of the stakeholders that are making these decisions, to hear them demonize you in some type of way because they don't like the way or the methodology in which you have expressed yourself is disgusting. It's inappropriate to try and control and define how are you supposed to express your frustration with a process and a system that called you out, and then want to dictate how you're supposed to behave. They want to control your behavior in how it is that you respond and how it is that you express what it is that you'd like to see happen, and your frustration and concerns with what's happening with the existing program. So I think in my role, when I sit here and I speak before people, I understand the background that I bring to the table. I understand the audience that I reach. And so I'm very purposeful when I speak to people and bringing this out. We don't have a space. We being anyone who has any type of privilege, you have no right, no authority to check and control how it is that someone that has experienced any type of trauma, any type of harm, injustice, how it is that they express themselves. That's not our place to do that. And if you think you have the right to do that, or if you think that they should, I see this word thrown around a lot, humble themselves. You need to humble your own thought process. I don't want to bring in the word ego here, but that's what you need to do, to think that someone has to abide by your rules, your barometer, your understanding in terms of how to operate in order to move forward in the system that you quote unquote have an upper hand in. All right, I'm going to step off that soapbox because I didn't mean to go that
But
far.
Hoffman, man, it's ridiculous. You understand? To be blocked by Hoffman, Steve Hoffman. Shailene Title blocked me. She unblocked me now because it's against the law for them to block you. You know, these are public officials. Shakia Scott blocked me the whole time she was here. She blocked me on her IG. On her Twitter, and then told me not to call her no more. You understand? And these are individuals. So if you look at me and my wife, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We fighting for everybody. You look at the work we've done. Stop listening to the rumors. If you look at the work we've done, you look at the Massachusetts Marijuana Social Equity Report, and you read the work we've done for y'all. You understand me? They can't just, first of all, I don't believe in a black leader. I don't see, who's the Spanish leader?
Well,
who's the Italian leader?
And this goes back to
who's the Jewish leader?
A population that's a monolith. There are all these.
Yeah, so it's a farce that black folks need a leader. So that's one. So if you have a black person or a black individual doing well, that's cool. I see it as my charge or our charge to lift each other up, especially if we're talking about equity. Like I just told you what this is. This is in response to the war on drugs. So our PIES program, in 18 months, we're looking at 20% minority participation. 20% minority participation in 18 months going through our PIES program. The PIES program is so beautiful. When you're talking about equity, that's everything that equity is. You have the top 100 performing companies, and then once they go through, then it extends to other marijuana companies. But if I'm a
and it's open to any establishment. It's a model that any establishment could utilize because of their commitment to seeing that equity actually happens, and they don't want to just sit there and throw money and hours towards something just to say that they did something. And the role that the CCC plays in promoting this and getting behind this is significant, because without that type of accountability and that type of acknowledgement for people participating in this, because we in the PIES program we do have incentives. Those incentives are tied to what the CCC controls and what they can weigh in on. And so for all of those reasons, the CCC needs to be getting behind that. And if anything, they need to be providing structure for what it is that we want to say, instead of turning around and thinking that they are the ones to carry this burden themselves. And then on top of that, they themselves have said that there are different establishments that have reached out to them and say, we want to help. We
personally know establishments that reached out that said they want to do incubator style programs.
Well, not just incubator style. They want to support.
They want to participate.
They want to support businesses that are owned, operated, and led by people in the EE program, people in the SE program.
Yeah, because PIES is more than an incubator. Incubator has a negative name.
They want to provide their services, their expertise. They want to partner up because they want to create an industry